Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Comlink meeting. We will begin our meeting in approximately 45 seconds to allow other attendees who are in the waiting room to join us. And so please stand by. Again, you've joined the August 2020 meeting of Santa Ana Communication Linkages Forum. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Once again, thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Scott Kuttner, and I work for the City of Santa Ana in the Neighborhood Initiatives Office. And you have joined us for the August 2020 meeting of the Santa Ana Communication Linkages Forum. Many of you know that Comlink represents Santa Ana's neighborhoods, and each month, Comlink comes together to discuss public policy matters of citywide significance. Our meeting tonight will be facilitated by the board of Comlink with some support from city staff as well. So I'd like to acknowledge my colleague, Margarita Macedonio, who will be assisting with interpreting and back-end production, as well as Alyssa Ventura, Narcy Perez, and Ivan Orozco. Before we jump into our agenda and start our meeting, I wanted to remind our attendees that your thoughts and questions are very, very important to us. So please use the question box to type your question or raise your hand during the meeting so that we're able to acknowledge you and focus on the topics and questions that you have. In addition, I wanted to remind you that our Comlink meeting includes a separate Spanish language call-in line so that interpreting of our meeting can be provided to Spanish speakers. And our Spanish speakers are able to ask questions as well through that separate call-in line. And so that's a separate channel of communication that you may not see on this main platform, but is part of the support that we provide. At this time, I would like to introduce the Vice Chair of Comlink, Mr. Carl Benninger, who will introduce the Board of Communication Linkages and lead us in the flag salute. Carl?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this warm summer night. Comlink we are all volunteers, point that out, and every member of this board gives much of his time or her time to the city and to this group. We start off with our president, Peter Katz, who's been our president for the last 4 years. We have Terry McCall and George Collum, board members, and they'll be screening the questions tonight. We also have Irma Macia and Leon Jacob, and our secretary, Evangeline Goransky. Peter, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes, Carl. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands for, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Going to our brief announcements, we have 3 of them tonight. And the first one is going to be by the City Planning Manager, Vince Fergrosa, and it's about the general plan update. Vince?
Yes, thank you, Carl. Good evening, board members there. I want to take a brief moment of your time to give you an update on our general plan. As you may know, the city's general plan, there we go. Slide 2, please. Ping. Ping. There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Alyssa. The city's general plan is essentially our long-term policy document that helps us guide the future development of the city. It also covers economic health as well as sustainability of our Santa Ana community. It's a long-range vision document. It's about 20 to 25 years in vision. We have one right now that was last updated in 1982. So obviously a lot of things have changed from 1982 to today. It's time we update our document. We've been working on this update since 2015, and we're now getting close to the finish line here with this document. It's got 12 different elements that covers all aspects of the city, from urban design, historic preservation, economic prosperity, open space, noise, but most importantly, land use. So this document is currently out right now for review. Next slide, please. It's currently out for review for its public comment period. The general plan, as well as the environmental impact report that goes with it, were both released for public review on August 3rd. The closing period for the comments is September 16th. We are going to go to Planning Commission on September 14th to provide them with an update on the project, as well as take any public comments on the documents. So if anybody has any comments on these documents, you can find them, first of all, on that website that's listed there under our santa-ana.org general plan website. If you have any questions or comments, you can go to the new general plan at santa-ana.org to leave your comment. Then we have a phone number where you can leave your messages as well. So this is a critical time for us right now. Again, we've been doing this since the end of 2015. Where now these documents have finally been drafted. They're done. They're out for review. So if you get a chance, please take a look at them. Reach out to myself, reach out to these web pages here, make a phone call. We can answer any questions you have. We are looking forward to getting any comments from you, because the bottom line, this is a citywide document. It's not a planning staff document. It's not a city manager document. It's a city document that's supposed to get everybody's input. That's what we're trying to do right now, get as much input as possible. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, have a good evening.
Thank you, Vince. Just quickly, when's the last time that the city plan was updated? General plan.
1982 was comprehensively updated. We've done
So
some sporadic changes. The one element that gets updated every 7 years is the housing element, and that's due to get updated next year. But for comprehensively, 1982. I think I was wearing OP shorts, had really long hair back then. So I've changed, and this plan has changed as well. So
I agree. Hair was much longer then.
yes.
Well, thank you, Vince, very, very much.
Thank you very much for all your time. Stay safe, everybody.
Very, very pleased to announce Lisa Solomon. She's been with us for a number of years and does a great job. And she's going to talk about the school and what's happening with the schools. Lisa, go ahead, please.
Hi, everybody. This is Lisa Solomon, the principal at Madison Elementary and the liaison for Santa Ana Unified. Of course, as you all know, our schools reopened with distance learning 2 weeks ago. We've been able to connect with the majority of our kids. We've been handing out hotspots and Chromebooks, and that's the big announcement that I wanted to make to everyone, is just to make sure that everybody knows that we do have hotspots available for our students. We also have Chromebooks that are available, and schools are offering also some technical assistance if needed. We want to make sure that our kids can connect, and if you can help us get the word out. We've distributed thousands of Chromebooks, thousands upon thousands of Chromebooks and hotspots as well. I can tell you at Madison, we've given out almost 500 hotspots to our 950 students. So there is a great need for wireless and being able to connect to the internet. But our schools have been working hard. We've been working on weekends to try to get as much information out as we can to our parents about how to connect with their teachers, as well as whatever devices are needed. Please make sure that you're reaching out to your schools. Our superintendent did come out with the letter about when schools would be reopening now that Orange County is off the watch list. But one of the key points that he made within his letter is that we are keeping a close eye on Santa Ana numbers, and that's really going to be what's going to guide us to when we will reopen. We aren't sure when that will be, but we are looking at the numbers each and every day, and we're looking at them closely, just because the numbers are still high in Santa Ana. Thank you.
Alicia, just quickly, the school is in session now online.
Yep, we're in session online now, and it's amazing. It's amazing. I get to visit classrooms every day, Carl, and when you see 30 kids, it says 33 people. So knowing that the teacher and I are each one, there's 30 kids, you know, or 31 kids in the classroom. They're showing up, they're checking in, they're doing their work. Teachers take attendance, they assign work to the students. They're also able to check the students' work. Today we had trainings for parents on how to get your children's work turned in through Google Classroom. So we're also doing a lot of parent trainings, parent meetings. Tonight is back to school night for a lot of the schools as well.
That is very good to hear, because one of the concerns about springtime was the kids attending, but it sounds like now you're taking attendance, you know who's there, you know who's not, and that's great. But thank you,
Yes,
Lisa.
we're checking in with everyone. Thank you.
Okay. I'd just like to acknowledge that we have Irma Macia online, and there she is. Good evening, Ian. I just quickly want to talk about a person that we lost July 26th. And Rob was a heck of a cheerleader for the city, loved the city, supported the city, and most of all, he was a very dear friend. Rob had, at age 27, was elected to the school board, and by 30, he was elected to city council, where he served city council for 8 years and then returned to the school board for a number of 13 years. Bob was, I don't know how Rob had enough time in the day to do all that he did, and I could spend the next hour talking about him, all his activities, but here he was late in his life, still involved with trains, involved with Boys and Girls Club. All you had to do is say, Rob, I need your help, and he was there. His famous saying he said in his book they wrote on trains was, you sign all aboard. And that was really a philosophy for life, because Rob was always aboard. Myself personally, I worked with him on Measure G. I was co-chair after Mark McLaughlin was that for a while. I was chair of the Citizens Review team. And Rob would attend all the meetings. He'd come at the end of the meetings. He'd visit the schools. He was following up to what was happening. And through his efforts, and Joe Dixon, who was hired by the school, and Rob made sure that happened, they were able to parlay the $350 million that we voted for them in our taxes to $850 in matching funds, $850 million when you add the matching funds. And so a lot of our schools today are because of the improvements that Rob Richardson made. So it's very appropriately that he's going to be honored with a school being named after him. But I just want to make sure that we mark his passing. As I said, a great cheerleader for Santa Ana, loved people, loved the city, and he was a true friend to all of us. Thank you. We're going to talk about street racing, and we're fortunate to have Commander Chuck Elms with us, and he'll be presenting to Council on Tuesday, because Council had asked for input from them what we could do, and unfortunately, since that request, we unfortunately had the death on North Santa Ana. Another person, innocent person, losing his life to some people racing down the street. So though Mr. Elms, Commander Elms can't tell us everything, I can't still stun it from Tuesday's meeting, but he's going to update us on a number of issues with it. Commander?
Thank you, Carl. So good evening, everyone. I'm Commander Chuck Elms. I'm the traffic commander at the Santa Ana Police Department. It's my pleasure to be with you tonight. I wanted to give you a quick update on some street racing activity that we've all seen. I'm sure you've seen it. We've seen it as well. I do have a presentation that I'll be presenting at City Council meeting on Tuesday that has a PowerPoint as well. But I think I can answer some of your questions and kind of tell you what we've already been doing. We're aware of the problem. We have partnered with Public Works to come up with some short-term solutions and some long-term solutions to the street racing problem. Public Works has some great engineering ideas that they'll be presenting at City Council as well on Tuesday. What I want to do is you brought it up, Carl. I want to talk about the fatality. We've actually had 2 fatalities this year due to street racing. And I want to make a distinction between the street racing that caused those 2 fatalities versus the organized street racing that we sometimes see. The street racing that caused the fatalities was an impromptu, spare of the moment race. It wasn't a planned group that arrived at the location to engage in street racing. I think what's also important to bring up regarding the collision that occurred on Santa Clara and Bristol is that although it appears it involves street racing, it also involved DUI. One of the drivers involved in the race was extremely intoxicated. And then we have the organized street racers. Those are the street racers that organize, they're a club, they come into a city, not just our city, but it's happening all over the county. And they take over intersections, they peel out, they race. And that is kind of what we're gearing up to combat. We have an approach that involves Public Works, the district attorney's office, our allied agencies. To date, we've conducted about 14 operations since actually July 5th, 14 operations to combat street racing, 2 of which involved using our allied agencies as resources. They came into our city. Some of the long-term solutions we're looking at is creating a task force with agencies from throughout Orange County, and we would respond to where the racers are. Because they don't just come to Santa Ana, they go to South Orange County, they go to Irvine, Costa Mesa. And as a task force, we would respond. So we're just not going to hit them when they're in Santa Ana, we're gonna hit them wherever they go in the county. And hopefully that discourages them and they leave. One of the questions that was brought up, can we take cars? Absolutely, we can take cars. We have taken cars, we'll continue to take the vehicles of the street racers. It's something that the law allows us to do. We have a district attorney and a police chief that are very supportive of taking these vehicles away from the racers and sending them to a special inspector through the state of California. Before they get their car back, before they can register it, they'll have to have it inspected. They'll have to remove all the modified equipment. Sometimes that exceeds the value of the car. So again, we're going to hit them from multiple angles, hit them from an enforcement standpoint, from a traffic engineering standpoint, and I can't wait to do the full presentation on Tuesday at City Council.
We are taking questions. Peter and I'm sorry, Terry and George, have we received any questions yet?
I haven't received any written questions, but I have a question myself. Will the city be doing any enforcement for cars that are breaking the sound limits and things like that to deter that? A lot of times I've caught with my drone the street racers and the helicopters about 18 minutes after they've already left the area. But if we can do something to get the vehicle code enforced where the cars are so loud, that would be a deterrent for them coming here. Can that be done prior to just chasing them after the fact?
Well, again, we have to stop someone to write them a ticket for the loud exhaust, any modifications that increase the noise is against the law. And that's definitely part of our enforcement strategy, is to do that. And like I said before, we can send them to a state inspector who will further look into that modification, not just the muffler that's making the noise, but the air intake system, the engine, anything that enhances the sound of the vehicle will have to be taken off. You mentioned drones. If you have drone footage, I would love for you to share that with me. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the question stems more, are we doing something preemptive or only after we catch them racing? Because there are a lot of cars at 2 in the morning that are so loud they're waking up 10,000 people. And if we can get them just as they're going through town, and I mean, it's pretty obvious to tell who's modified and who's not. Can we preemptively do anything?
Explain to me preemptively.
I'm going down Bristol, or I actually, it happened the other night. We're on MacArthur having dinner and the car's going by so loud that the glass was vibrating that was supposed to shield us from the sound. And it was quite obvious it was a modified vehicle. Is there something that can be done with that? They may not be a street racer, but if they go through at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're going to wake up 10,000 people, whether they're racing or not.
Well, certainly, if one of our officers identifies that vehicle, they can stop that vehicle and issue a citation for the amplified noise. Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Commander Elms, that was
Yes.
that was my question about asset forfeiture. Do you have to issue a citation first before you can seize a vehicle, or can you go directly to court and seize that vehicle?
That's a great question. Yes, we can. Don't let all the cats out of the bag, Peter. That's part of our strategy. Absolutely, we can do that. And that's something we plan on doing.
Very good.
You can
I
come
just
work.
want to remind people that in the chat box, you can ask any questions. Again, George or Terry, have we seen any questions come in yet? Okay. All right. With that, then, I don't know if any of the other board members have any questions or not. Seeing none, Commander, I appreciate your time. Thank you. And we'll be watching on Tuesday for your presentation.
Great. Everybody have a great night.
Thank you, sir. Next is
Carl.
Daniel.
Hey,
Yes.
Carl, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to remind everybody that we have copies of the handouts, right, from the presenters available off of the toolbar. If you open up the handout section, you'll see we have a handout for the next item that's coming up from the city manager's office as an example. It's a PDF. There's also a copy of the handout that Vince Ragoso provided earlier, and then our public works presentation is available too. So for the viewers at home, you are able to download these handouts and share them with members of your neighborhood after tonight for your convenience. And so, Carl, I apologize for that interruption, and I just wanted to pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Scott. I very much appreciate that input on it. Our next presentation is going to talk about Daniel Soto from the city manager's office and talk about the election coming up. And as we say every year, get out and vote. We're not here to tell you who to vote for, but get out to vote. It's the best privilege that we have. The best way we can let our voices be heard. So we have election coming up on November 3rd. Daniel, would you please start your presentation?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me attend tonight's Comlink meeting. I wanted to, just a second. I wanted to give a brief presentation about the 2020 elections and just wanted to make sure that everyone can see the 2020 election slide on the screen.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Daniel.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So I wanted to provide a brief overview of what the city's role is in our elections process. And currently, the way our city is set up, the city clerk's office or clerk of the council office serves as our elections official and is responsible for a handful of things. That includes candidate filings, the issuance and acceptance of nomination papers, local city measures, publication of all legal notices, campaign and conflict of interest filings required by the Fair Political Practices Commission. So this year is an election year. We have our 2020 general municipal election that's taking place on November 3rd, 2020. And we currently have 4 council seats that are open, the mayoral seat and wards 1, 3, and 5. So what's different this year? If many will recall, back in 2018, the voters approved a ballot measure to transition the city to district-based or ward-based elections. And what this means is only the registered voters that reside within a district or in Santa Ana within a ward votes for their council member who resides within that ward. The mayor, however, continues to be elected at large. So everyone, regardless of the ward that they live in, will continue to vote for mayor. That same year in 2018, the city council adopted the new ward boundaries. So the numbering changed and the boundaries of each of our wards changed as well. And this is a phased approach. Like I mentioned earlier, with wards 1, 3, and 5, we'll be electing council members for those new wards. And in 2022, we'll be electing council members for wards 2, 4, and 6. And here's what our new ward map looks like. So one of the changes that you'll see instantly is you'll see the numbering go from 1 to 6, from left to right. And some of the boundaries look a little familiar, but they have certainly changed. And for folks that want to become more familiarized with these boundaries, our maps are available on our website. But for more precise information, if folks are interested in finding out where exactly their residence is, we have a pretty cool map on our website where you can enter in your address. I used a red box here to denote where you can do that. enter your address, and our map, our GIS map, will tell you what ward you live in for the new ward boundary. And for transparency, the clerk of the council office has published the final list of qualified candidates in ballot order for the November election. And you can visit our website at santa-ana.org/elections to find out this information and anything else regarding our local municipal election for 2020. Here are some important dates for the remainder of this calendar year. September 7th is the write-in candidacy filing period opening date. October 20th is the filing period closing date. October 19th is the last day to register to vote. October 5th is the day that the registrar of voters mails out mail-in ballots. November 3rd, of course, is election day. November 13th, as an FYI, campaign signs must be removed. And by no later than December 3rd, is the deadline to certify election results for our local elections. And just some information from the registrar of voters. There are 3 ways that folks can vote this year. We will have the OC vote centers that are placed all throughout Orange County. So if you are an Orange County registered voter, you can register to vote at any OC vote center. Second option is vote by mail. You'll receive an official vote by mail ballot, and you can return the ballot in via U.S. mail. Or third, you can take your vote by mail ballot and drop it off in a ballot drop box. And there are a handful located throughout Santa Ana and all throughout Orange County. So where can we find out more information about that? The Registrar of Voters website at ocvote.com. And also, just a reminder again, you can register to vote online at ocvote.com/registration. And that's it. I'm available if you have any questions.
Yes, I have a question. This is George Collins. Several years back, we looked at the registry, and we found 2,742 people over 118 years old or something like that. They actually didn't exist anymore. Since these are going out, you said, to registered voters, do you know if anything's been done to clean up the voter registry so people that are over 120 years old, which don't exist, won't get ballots?
That's a really good question. What I can do is I can circle back with our registrar of voters staff and find out and let you know, and I can report back to the Comlink board.
Thank you very much. Emails with my name there. You can send direct to me if you like.
Thank you. And
Thank
this
you.
is Scott. And I'm sorry, Daniel, to interrupt you, but I just wanted to remind our attendees and our participants that if you can raise your hand using the software if you have a question, or you can type a question into the question box, and that way our Comlink board members, Terry McCall and George Collins, can get those queued up, and we can ask those questions, not only of Daniel Soto, but of our other presenters too that we have scheduled.
Yeah, Daniel, could you tell us how many candidates we have in each one of the wards?
I can. Just a second.
Just a number.
Sure.
Daniel, do we still need you to share your screen, or are you just going to do a web search at this point?
I'm doing a web search on the side. The presentation's still up, and I think that's what folks can still see. If I need to go back, I can do that.
Very good.
And so here's the information. We have for Ward 1, we have 4 candidates. For Ward 3, we have 5 candidates. For Ward 5, we have 4 candidates. And for mayor, we have 6 candidates.
Correct. And let me point out that Ward 5 is the only one where we have an incumbent running. So Ward 1, 3, and the mayor will be new people. All the incumbents have turned out or are not running again on it. I would like to add, with that many people running, I'd just like to highlight that there will be an online candidate forum on September 10th for the awards, sponsored by Connect to Console. And then that's on September 10th. And then on September 17th will be an online Connect to Console candidate debate for mayor. And you can look at the website of Connect to Console to see how you can tune in and to listen to those. And also the chamber will be doing the same thing on the, I believe, the 30th of September. I'm not sure exactly what date they're doing it. But again, you can look at their website. So there is a way of getting information. And like as we have already said, this is a year we have a number of candidates in all the wards and for mayor. And it is going to change the makeup of our council. So please get out and vote. Again, have we got any questions, Terry or George? To emphasize, you again can ask question, raise your hand, or type in a question, and we'll gladly get them to the right folks.
Actually, there is one question from Winston Covington asking for the names of the candidates.
That information is available on the city website with the URL that we see on the screen. You visit www.santa-ana.org/elections. You can view all the candidate information, including an affidavit of residence, ballot designation, and their candidate statement.
Very good. Peter, any questions or you all set? Okay. All right. With that, then, Daniel, thank you, sir. We appreciate the input.
Thank you.
And thank you to the city manager for sharing you with us on it tonight. Okay. Our next topic, and actually our main topic, Tag Higgins from City Public Works will be presenting it. And it's an upgrade regarding the wireless telecommunications that is going on or being put in the city. Tag, would you like to proceed?
Yes, Carl, thank you. I'm going to have to ask Margarita if she can provide, if she can share her screen, because my presentation is frozen. Oh, no, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. There we go. Thanks. Good evening, all. I know many of you. I'm Kate Higgins, Principal Civil Engineer in Traffic Engineering, Development Engineering, part of Public Works. And tonight I wanted to give you some information related to updates to our wireless facilities in the public right-of-way guidelines. I'll get into a little bit of background on it. So what we'll look at tonight is some of the demand and the reasons why we're seeing so many of these new small cells, what the expectations will be for how many and what they'll look like, some regulatory framework, and then kind of the important part is what our current wireless guidelines allow and encourage, and what we are looking to change, and what our proposed wireless guidelines will show, and then the schedule. So very quickly, I know many of you have probably seen this before, but I think it's worth repeating because this is the reason why the wireless companies are looking to install so many of these small cell antennas throughout the city. The wireless demand continues to go at an exponential rate.
Tag,
Yeah.
this is Scott. I just want to let you know that we're not seeing your presentation. We just sort of see a screenshot that says connected to GoToWebinar. So I'm not sure if that's what you had intended, but I just wanted to make you aware of that we're not seeing.
Thank you, Scott. Now, let me make sure I have the right. Here we go. Is that it? Thank you.
Yes, we see your increased wireless demand slide.
Yeah, that's the one. And so this is, again, this is kind of the graphic that illustrates that exponential demand and how that has gone up considerably. I mean, I think in general, what I've seen on some estimates, it doubles about every 2 to 3 years. And so it's, as I say, it's exponential, the growth. And the small cells in particular, I know many of you are familiar with what the macro cells look like. Sometimes they're in public right of way, but primarily in private property, either, you know, as a tree or sometimes just a big tower. They are much taller. They might be 60, 70 feet high. The small cells are typically about 25 to 35 feet high. At least the ones that we have seen in the city are about that high. They're a lower power, and so they also have a shorter coverage radius. Whereas the macro cells, they might have coverages of thousands of feet. The coverage radius for a small cell antenna maxes out usually effectively at around 500 feet. And so because of that limited range, we expect to see hundreds of them in the coming years. You know, and that's based on what we have heard from the small cell companies, the wireless providers like Verizon, AT&T, et cetera. I'll try to get through this quickly. It's just business related to the regulatory body. It's very important though, because much of what we do is governed by the FCC. The city is the permitting agency for these, but we must comply with some of the primary rules that the FCC and that Congress and the FCC has laid out. I think that's spelled out here on this slide. The first two pieces of legislation there were very important. Telecommunication Act of 1996. Obviously, it's been around a while, and that allowed for these companies to start putting in the cell towers. More recently, in 2018, there was this FCC order 18-133, and it was very controversial, but it did a number of things. And I wanted to give you an idea of some of the primary the mandates from those two pieces of legislation. And I'll just give you a few of them. There are obviously many, but one of the things, unfortunately, is the cities may not, in general, the cities may not regulate cell towers based on environmental effects of radio frequency. It also prohibits cities from requiring the least obtrusive antenna. And again, I mean, we would in many cases like to have a wireless provider put up something that is most aesthetic, and in general, we've been able to do that in many cases, but they are not bound by providing the most aesthetic antenna. And then finally, the final important rule that I was going to bring up is we can't have the cities cannot have rules or standards that would result in an effective prohibition. So, you know, one thing that the cell providers often bring up to us is, you know, they're a utility, they have rights to be in the public right of way. And so if we were to have standards that effectively said, you can't be in big swaths of the city, then that would go counter to these federal laws. So then the other two are more local. The other two bullet points I have on the screen are more local. We we created a wireless facilities ordinance in 2011 in the city and updated that because of this influx of the small cells in 2018. One of the things that this new wireless ordinance allows for is the final bullet point, the City of Santa Ana design guidelines and standards. Many of you are familiar with with our government, and so ordinance is something that the council adopts. The guidelines and standards can be done at the executive staff level, and so it's something that we staff prepared and is signed off by the Director of Public Works. So again, you know, the point of my discussion tonight is I wanted to talk about those guidelines and the changes that we are looking to bring forward. Again, something that Nabil will sign off on, but we want obviously community input, and our plan is to take it to council as informational and obviously their input. So the current design guidelines, they have preferences for location of the antenna on the facility, some specifics, mounting height, concealment, and we will carry all those through. And there are lists of acceptable support structure placement. So wood utility poles, streetlights, and then strand mounted on aerial fiber, and then carry your own standalone poles. And I'll have photos a little bit later in the presentation to kind of show you what those look like. In the guidelines themselves, there are no restrictions on historic properties or resources. That's something that we plan to put in the guidelines as well. So I know, and generally that has come up in some of the discussions, some of the proposals from the from the wireless providers, and feedback from the community. So now during the past few months, we have come across quite a few considerations in citing in placing or allowing or permitting these small cells, primarily the community feedback that we're getting. And by the way, I think I would say over the past year and a half, we've received maybe 150 to 200 applications. Many of them have actually been permitted and are in, but we have quite a few of them. So the other siting considerations are the availability of the city-owned streetlights, the fact that many of the streetlights that the city owns are the single king and double king streetlights, which, you know, the photos are there on the right and left, and those certainly do not lend to attaching a wireless facility on them. And so we're trying to think of other ideas that would be more aesthetic than some of the proposals that we've seen. So I mentioned that we've identified a lot of the historic resources in the city, and then those final two bullet points, California General Order 95, the CPUC General Order 95, and then Southern California Edison safety regulations. I bring those up because many of the alternative designs that we Santa Ana city staff present and suggest, I think the pushback from the utility company or from the wireless providers is often that General Order 95. Both of those are safety regulations, and so anyway, it just complicates things a little bit, and it's kind of pushing us towards some of the changes that we're looking to do. So we are revising our the main groups of changes that we're talking about are revising the hierarchy of the support structures. So what we're talking about is telling the wireless providers what our preferences are. And then the other thing is we're gonna put a distance from historic properties in the guidelines, so it's very clear to the wireless providers. So then the next three slides, I think, hopefully will illustrate what we are looking to place in the city. So the one on the left is the goal. That is, I think, what we are going to try to push for in as many locations as possible. And frankly, you know, I mean, beauty's always in the eye of the beholder. I think it looks not too bad. We haven't received a lot of concern related to that. I know not everybody loves it, but I think in general they look a lot better than most of the alternatives. So and on that one, all of the equipment is up in the top above the Cobra head mast arm on the street light. That would be a city standard pole, and then it's just again, it's just placed above the top of that. Any meters or other equipment that is necessary would be placed in a hand hole. So any meters or anything like that. So there wouldn't be any pedestals or anything like that. So as I said, that is the goal. We're trying to put in those instead of anything else as much as possible. So if we have an opportunity where there is an existing street light, Cobra head, and it could be on a steel pole or a Marbolite pole, similar to kind of what you're looking at there, or even a wood pole. Any one of those, we are getting the companies to replace with that kind of facility, the one you see on the left. And a little further on that same one, we are, if there is an opportunity maybe nearby where, you know, these wireless providers have a very small search ring. As I said, you know, you can only go so far with these. They only have a 500-foot radius range at most, and so they are very targeted, these locations. And so if we can get something within that search ring that where we can find an opportunity where we can place a new pole, then we are actually suggesting that a new, and I'm talking about a new streetlight pole. You know, if it's on a corner, that would obviously be helpful for you know, traffic safety, etc. So anyway, we try to exhaust those, and then if not, there are the other two choices that would be allowed again, and they are allowed now under the guidelines, and they would be allowed under the proposed guidelines, are a strand-mounted antenna, and again, it's kind of beauty's in the eye of the beholder. We have permitted probably over 100 of these, and we have not received a lot of complaints from them. I think people have not. A lot of times, people just don't notice them. And then finally, the one on the right is the one that we are getting pushback on, but we cannot prohibit them entirely. So that would be an attachment to an existing or replacement wood pole. So the next situation is in areas where there are only the decorative streetlights. So we don't have as much opportunity to put the Cobra heads. I think we will still have that as our first choice, but not on the street where there are single king or double king. We wouldn't mix that one. We wouldn't mix that type of light on streets where you have single kings or double kings. But again, if within a nearby street, you can, there are maybe some Cobra heads, we would ask the company to put it on that neighboring street. If that is not feasible, then this is really, I think, probably the most important thing that I'm looking for feedback on, and fully realizing it's not the best case scenario, would be placement of a new standalone pole. And we had not considered this early on. We were trying to, obviously we want to minimize the amount of new structures in the right of way. But I think in comparison with the one on the right that you see there, I think the one on the right in this screen is probably more palatable. And again, I want to remind you that we cannot, we've had many discussions with our attorneys. We cannot effectively prohibit them from being in an entire section of the city. So anyway, that was, as I say, that's kind of one of the most important things that I wanted to bring up, is this idea that our new guidelines would have a standalone pole. We looked at a lot of different examples of what other cities have done, and in fact, ones where they put that kind of facility on top of a double king decorative light, and frankly, I wouldn't propose it. But again, it's kind of a taste thing. So anyway, that's it for the locations where there are decorative lights. And then finally, we're going to propose something like this, where in a 100-foot radius around a historic property boundary, where we would prohibit any attachments at all, any kind of antennas at all. So in a location like that, they just couldn't put it up. The guidelines I mentioned earlier, the guidelines were they did not elaborate on where you would be able to place adjacent to or near a historic property. The city's ordinance actually said it cannot be in front of, beside, or behind a historic resource. And so I know there's been a little bit of interpretation by the other companies, and they wanted to know exactly what we meant by that. So we felt like something like this was important to put in the guidelines to say this is what we mean. This is where we think they should not be. So anyway, that is the end of my presentation, because those are the primary changes that we were looking at. There might be some other cleanup things, but that's it. And so I'm sorry, I did want to bring up the schedule. So obviously tonight's Comlink presentation, I'm looking for feedback, and then over the next month we plan to update the guidelines, bring it to City Council, do a presentation, let them know what we're looking at, and then following that we would publish updated guidelines. And those updated guidelines are on the city's website. I'm sorry that I did not include a link. It's under the Public Works Agency section of the website, but and if needed, I can certainly provide that. So that is the end of my presentation, and I'm here for questions and comments.
Tag, if someone wishes to give you information, how can they get in touch with you?
My email, sorry, it's not on there, is
no, I didn't see it.
It's T Higgins So it's THIGGINS at santa-ana.org. So, so T Higgins at santa-ana.org.
Thank you. George and Terry,
Okay.
have had any questions come in?
Yes, I've got a question from Carol Park. It's a three-part question, and then I have two questions myself. I don't have her exact address, but she says I'm getting a small cell 20 feet off my my home. Apparently, they selected a wood pole that has quite a bit on top of it already. She states that she disagrees with the slick new pole versus adding junk to an existing pole in a residential neighborhood would be a preference, but I'm not sure because the way she describes the existing pole, it looks like they've added a bunch of junk to it. I don't have contact information for her. If she'll send me a message with an email, I'll give that to you. Also, I have two questions. One, you said you're not getting a lot of feedback on some of the sites that have been installed. Is that due to the COVID and the preoccupation, or do you think it's just because there's no feedback?
No, thank you for that. Those, when I mentioned the feedback in particular, I was talking about those. Let me back up and show you which one in particular. It's that middle one, that strand mounted one, and even George, even the one on the right, we had permitted some of those. I'm thinking going back about 3 or 4 years. You know, these companies, T-Mobile and Crown Castle, AT&T, Verizon are some of the primary ones. They have been submitting these at a, you know, kind of a lesser clip than recently. And what we do through our previous ordinance is we were sending out on all of these installations, we would send out notices 300-foot radius. And, you know, you'd be surprised at how many people that reaches when you send out notices to 300-foot radius. And, you know, it frankly can get up in the hundreds, certainly depending on the density adjacent to it. And so I think at one point we counted about 30,000 notices we did on over maybe a 5-year period, and we had received only about 30 comments. You know, it was shockingly low, and most of those, well, they were all either the strand-mounted antenna or one similar to that existing wood utility pole. So I did want to respond also to the caller. I mean, and I do welcome any emails and all that. But as I say, our initial thought was, and I know we had discussed it with many people, looked at many other guidelines from many cities. Our preference was to allow something like that, and not put in a new pole in the city. You know, not put in a new standalone pole. And I think I had heard some feedback from some of the residents during these. They just did not want to allow anything like what you see there, the wood pole in the city. I think I know what you're saying as far as some of them have a lot of things on them already. That's an example, the one in that photo. Most of the other ones, most of the ones that I've seen that they are asking for, there's not much on the pole already. Again, getting back to those GO95 requirements, there are a lot of separation requirements, and so if there are wires above or below, they don't like to put them in those locations. I think that example there, there's probably just enough room to squeeze that in there. Anyway, so as I say, I would be happy to hear the specific comment, and if I can get that email, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, I sent the email to you in a private message that'll pop up on your screen in a few minutes. My last question is, the other day I sent you some links on what Elon Musk is doing with the low Earth orbit satellites for broadband. Is this anybody in the city looking into working with him or doing anything with that?
You know, George, that was the first I had heard anything about that. And so the answer is, at least as far as I know, no, we don't know anything about it. But certainly I'm going to have my staff look into it and see what we can find out. I wasn't familiar with it at all, and I don't know how many other agencies have done anything like that. You know, and frankly, we've been looking at some of the most progressive cities throughout, and I know a few years ago in some of the projects we were doing, we had a consultant who'd come in from the city of Santa Monica, and again, that's the first I've heard of it. When you mentioned it, you know, so we will just follow up, look into it.
What I'm going to do is bring everybody up to a little speed. The guy that invented the Tesla and the Dragon 9 rocket that just went up in space and brought the astronauts back is putting in 4,000 low Earth orbiting satellites for broadband and for satellite cellular that goes all over the Earth. And the projected outcome in the next couple of years, it'll be doing away with cell towers because everybody will be going to the satellite service. So that's what we're talking about. You can look at it on santa-ana.tv. There's a link there to actually sign up for it now. It's becoming that close. I believe it's being tested in Canada right now for how it works, but it'll be a worldwide communication system via satellite, which won't go down if there's an earthquake and a power failure. It won't be overloaded like cell towers can. So this is the next couple of years that we're looking at that he says he'll have this up. So that's what Tig and I are talking about. And you can, the name of it, I believe, is called Starlink, and you can Google that and look it up. It's quite impressive. So I'll close with that. I don't have any further questions I'm seeing.
George, I think that this is Scott, and I see that Carol Park had some additional questions in the question box.
What I think her final question is, my question is really about the poll selection process. 3 polls were evaluated at my house. They chose the closest to my home. What I did is I took her email that she gave me and I sent it to TIG so they can communicate directly about it.
Okay, very good. Yeah, because it looks like she inquired whether the decision could be reversed or reevaluated essentially as it related to her particular home. Thank you, George.
Thank you for that. I will look specifically at her location and where we are in the process with that. I know there were some locations certainly where we have pushed back on, and I don't know who that was, if that was Verizon or AT&T, but I know there were some areas where we told them we didn't want to allow it. It's obviously difficult if it fits the guidelines. In general, we were permitting them, but again, there were at least a few that we thought were not appropriate, didn't fit our guidelines. But I will, I'll take that email, follow up with Ms. Park, and let her know where we are in the process with that. One last thing I'll mention, I know we do require the companies to provide alternate locations. In general, their search ring is so small that they, at best, they might find a few of them. They might find a few that could fit, that could accommodate that gap in coverage or that future gap in coverage. Anyway, so it's very, very small, and so the options are typically pretty limited.
Yeah, I do have two questions. First of all, is the city realizing any revenue income from all of these sales?
Thank you for that, Carl. when they go on the Cobra head type streetlights, we will likely recognize some revenue. It is all staff cost recovery. So it's permitting costs and license fees, that we go to pay the people who are processing that. And then there are some ongoing inspection costs, which are not a lot. In fact, the ongoing inspection costs that we have in the agreements with Verizon, AT&T, and the other company, Crown Castle, are around $250 a year per pole. And then there is an amount that we are allowed to charge, and again, it's silly that the FCC should be in our business, but the FCC set a max amount that we could charge for these, and it's $270 a year per pole. So that amount, that money, that's general fund money that goes to the general fund.
Very good. The second question, with all these increasing radio waves, any fear of any health concerns?
I don't know, and certainly I'm not an expert on that. I know we've said it before. The city is not allowed to regulate or deny a permit based on environmental effects of wireless radio frequency. That's what I'm looking for. We're not allowed to deny based on those effects. We do require them to certify that they are that they're compliant with FCC guidelines. Again, in fact, that's about all we can do. And I'm not going to say our hands are tied, but that's what these federal guidelines are telling us. In fact, one other thing I didn't mention that I don't believe that I mentioned that FCC order from 2018 that had quite a bit of restrictions. It was challenged in court, and only in fact, just within the last 2 weeks, mostly this order was upheld, almost entirely upheld. And so it had a lot of those things related to the fees and many more things. In fact, we have a timeline that we have to act. We either have to approve or deny in a very short period of time, 60 days, which is pretty darn quick. Anyway, all of that was in that FCC order, and along with those radio frequency restrictions.
Carl, I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Peter.
Your question about the health and safety is one that I raised in the neighborhood, because if we don't research this and we don't get the facts out to the community, we're going to be facing lawsuits if people are affected, if their young kids are affected by brain waves, whatever happens from these. We need to have some research into this. And I know, Tate, you don't have that information, but you have to get that information out to the community to allow people to have self-assurance that their kids are not going to be affected in the future. And secondly, what about interference with telecommunications, whether people's cell phones or their internet or their TV subscriptions? Will these cell towers interfere with reception in the neighborhood? And the third is it going to increase cost to residents, whether on their utility bills or however that's going to be passed on? And the last thing is vandalism. Are we going to have people climbing these poles to grab this stuff for recycling fees? So these are some of the issues that I have.
Thank you, Peter. I will. I'm gonna address what I can. In fact, I believe on the at least the research. There is I think I included a slide that we had seen previously. I think Nabil, the last time, either when you at one of the last Comlink meetings, Nabil had this slide. Either Nabil did or Jack Chula, our IT director, had this slide. And frankly, these are some things that we've looked at before on these FAQs. They all relate back to FCC websites. And I know when we have asked for information from the wireless companies, this is what they get. I mean, we can certainly look further on our own for something independent of FCC, but at least they are the governing agency. So anyway, I certainly appreciate that question, and I think I know you talked about the liability. It's something, I think it's probably important for me to bring that up to our folks, city attorney's office, and maybe risk management folks, that kind of thing, and I will do that. You mentioned the interference, and I think that's the reason why they're putting them up. You mentioned interference with your cell phones, etc. The whole idea with these things is to provide better service, so you don't have. It's not necessarily for dropped calls. It's for all the high data uses. The streaming. The apps, the games, whatever it is that's driving all those uses. You asked about increased costs, and the answer is no to that. All of these, the cell sites themselves, the cell antennas themselves, have meters. So they're paying the electricity on the meter. And in fact, we will have separate meters for city streetlights versus the meters for the cell antennas. So there will actually be 2 meters. Sometimes we don't even pay a metered rate. We just pay a standard rate for our streetlights. But there will be a meter for the actual cell site. And that's not something we will have to pay for. We, the city, will have to pay for. The final one on the vandalism, I don't know. It's a good question. I guess anything is susceptible. I haven't heard of any of those things being taken apart. I guess it's a good question. I know vandals here in the Civic Center will go after just about anything. They're relatively high. They're up probably a minimum of about I think probably a minimum of about 25 feet. They're fairly high, 25 to 30 feet, something like that. So it's a tough task to get up there. But it's like anything else. The owner of the facility, which is the wireless company, will have to take care of the damage. They would have to take care of the any of the graffiti or anything like that on there, and take care of the damage.
Tag, how much would you estimate our completion? Are we going to see more of these, or are we where we stand in percentage that you think are going to go in?
I have no sure idea, but I would certainly say it's well into the hundreds that we're going to be seeing on these. Right now, I am working with Verizon on these ones right here, the streetlights, and they have submitted, I think, about 70 applications. So that's just one company in probably only 3 or 4 months after we finalized an agreement with them. So So that, as I say, that's just one company. They are much more aggressive, or they're moving much faster, I should say, than the other companies. But I recently got a call from somebody at Crown Castle. You know, they're looking to get started, and then AT&T. Right now, we are just doing one with AT&T on one of these types. You know, they have submitted a lot of other ones, and so I said we've probably already permitted a couple hundred of these over the years, and I would imagine we're going to look at hundreds more.
Very good.
Carl, this is Scott, and I think that Keith Carpenter had a question actually that came in, and perhaps we can just unmute Keith and see whether he can ask his question himself. Keith,
Sounds
are
good.
you there?
Yes, I am. It's kind of a glitchy connection, so I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you, Keith. Go ahead, please.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm just curious if, I understand this will be general fund money, if the council has earmarked this for anything in particular, or if it's actually going to go into the general fund. I see Nabil shaking his head there.
It's not that significant amount of money. Like Tig mentioned, it's $270 per installation, and we're talking about what is it? About maybe 200 installations right now, and those are the ones on our light poles only. The ones that go on the tower poles, we don't get any money for that. So you know, you multiply 270 by, I don't know, 170 right now, Tig, maybe 200. The math isn't that much.
270, about how many locations you said?
200. Now.
That's $54,000. I mean, I'll take it if you guys don't want it.
Okay.
But that's not pocket change. I mean, there's a lot of good that can be done with that. And my only concern is the general fund, just to be quite frankly, a slush fund for the council. So I'm just curious if that can be earmarked for students. We just heard the woman from the school district saying they need more hotspots and more computers, because that to me would be a good way to get that money spent. Otherwise, it just goes there and it disappears. You know what I mean?
I agree. That money will probably come in year one. So correct. Take that money will be after year one. So in 12 months from now, maybe, I don't know, 10 months from now, we start collecting some of that money.
So who would we talk to get that kind of designated for a specific purpose?
Go to council. I'd contact your council person. I'd attend a council meeting.
I do that. Just spoke with our council person earlier this week. Yeah, we'll see. I never hold my breath for that. As you know. But yeah, I'll try that. But yeah, I was just curious if anything had been planned for that, because otherwise I understand it most likely, if it goes to the general fund, it disappears. So yeah, as long as I got a number, 54,000 sounds about reasonable, given the number of locations we think. And do we have a specific name for that revenue?
No.
It would just be from the cell site installation.
I don't think we collected that much money yet, especially the 270 right now. What we collect is the permitting fees and even the inspection fee. We haven't collected on that, because that comes due in 1 year inspection fee, and then the 270 is at the end of the first year. So we haven't collected really money. The 270 hasn't been collected yet. All we do is like Tig mentioned, is the staff cost recovery fees and permitting fees and our cost of administering the program, which pays for our staffing.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm just saying that, and that's good to know that money hasn't come in yet. So now it's be a good time to get that allocated specifically through our council.
Great, thank you, Keith. Okay, back to you, Carl.
Okay.
Back to you and Peter, I should say.
Okay. Well, just Terry or George, are there any other questions that have come in on this issue?
No, I don't see any at this time, Carl.
And then with that, Tag and Nabel, thank you for your time and effort. We appreciate the update. With that, also, I want to remind people that our next meeting is going to be September 24th, and we'll be online also at that time. And the other thing I want to mention is that Bernice Caldwin unfortunately lost her husband just a short time ago. Name's Joe. And we'd like to close this meeting in memory of him. Bernice has dedicated a lot of her time and effort to the city, volunteer like what we have. And we appreciate that. And we join her in her sorrow, and we keep her in our prayers and our hopes. So with that, I'd like to adjourn this meeting tonight. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Yes,
Carl, I have a couple of things I want to say.
Peter, go ahead.
First, can you run down the list of candidates for office? That was not mentioned at all, the actual names. And secondly, if you look at that list, people want to at least know the names. And next is to let people know that the ballots go out by I think it's the first week in October, and
They're being mailed out. They're being mailed out October 5th.
Right, and they'll have till November 3rd to register to vote on election day.
Well, remember, we're going to have voting centers, and they are planning right now, unless things change, but right now they're planning to have 5-day voting centers, and that you can also turn your ballot in, or you can mail it, or you can drop it off at a mailbox. And at the voting centers, you can register to vote also with it. I don't have the list here in front of me. I have seen that list. I've seen the names. I don't know if George has it or not on his computer, but George, you want to read them off?
We talked about the election, but nobody rattled off the names. So there are people out there.
Let's see if George has the list there. He can read off from.
This is Scott. The other option is we can send the link out to the Comlink membership list, by email, so people can go to that site and can see the names of all the candidates basically who are running. I think that again, Daniel Soto mentioned earlier that there's much more information there than just their names. There's their whole affidavit and information and background that people may be interested in beyond simply hearing the name of the person.
But he put out the website, yeah. But there are people that don't have access to computers that just might want to know who's running.
Peter, this is Margarita. I think because we have a candidate who's running, who's on the board, we don't want to go there right now.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, sorry, Margarita.
Okay, with that, let me adjourn this meeting, and thank you for all the folks for listening in. We appreciate it. Good evening and good night.